Three spine-chilling true haunted tales revealed. Terrifying Episode 165 of Unexplained. FRS. The night draped over Maplewood like a thick, suffocating fog. Julia stumbled through the keyhole of her front door, fighting against exhaustion. The aftershocks of her long shift at the diner still rattled in her bones. But her weariness turned quickly to dread as she caught sight of Tommy, sitting cross-legged in the glow of the flickering lamp, whispering to an empty space. "Mom, my friend says Mr. Anderson has a secret." His words were unnervingly calm. Chills crept down Julia's spine, a cold grip of anxiety tightening around her heart. She brushed it off as just another of Tommy's imaginary games. But then her mind wandered, to the unsettling news about the disappearances swirling within Maplewood's tight-knit community. Oddly, the news reports often mentioned Mr. Anderson, their neighbor just a few doors down. Just an imaginary friend, right? She forced a smile, but unease tugged at her. What did Tommy know, really? She turned, shaking off the chill that wriggled through her. Yet, as she walked to the kitchen, shadows flitted at the corners of her vision, and the stark silence grew oppressive. Hours later, as she huddled on the couch, flipping through the channels to suspend her dread, there it was: a breaking news report. Another child has gone missing from Maplewood. Authorities are examining Mr. Anderson's property. The room spun. Julia felt the walls close in. Tommy's tiny voice echoed in her head, "He knows things, Mom. He knows things about the neighbors." The unfinished thought sent a shudder through her. A parent's instinct kicked in, an icy warning of danger. She glanced at the window, unease bubbling into panic as she recalled the expressions on her neighbors' faces from the last block, gathering smiles that seemed too practiced, too hollow. What if Mr. Anderson was just a wolf in sheep's clothing? Before she could consider her next thought, the door creaked softly as if inviting her to the darkened night. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The moment hung heavy in the air as fear twisted deep within her. Tommy's soft voice floated through her mind, unwavering. "Mom, what if he's hiding them?" Julia's breath quickened. She had always prided herself on being a good mother, but what could she do against a danger lurking so close, unseen? That feeling of being watched returned with full force, scraping against her nerves. She approached the living room window, memories of laughter echoing too loudly in her thoughts, the children playing carefree, now just shadows. Swallowing her fear, she turned back towards Tommy. She had to keep him safe, protect Lily too. But in her heart, doubt seeped deep. Was he lying in wait just beneath the surface, that monster disguised as Mr. Anderson? And then, as the air thickened with tension, there were soft, childlike knocks at the glass. Julia froze. The silhouette outside was small, familiar, yet somehow ominous. Her heart raced, a creeping dread clawing its way into every corner of her mind. What if Tommy's stories were more than mere whispers? As the figure outside beckoned her closer, the shrill cry of panic echoed through her thoughts. Was her neighborhood haunted, or was the real horror just beginning? Julia's heart thudded in her chest, drowning out the quiet hum of the night. The knock sounded again, sharper this time, sending a jolt of icy fear through her veins. She took a cautious step toward the window. The silhouette remained, shadowy and familiar. It was Tommy's friend, or so she thought, but something about the way the figure swayed in the dim light set off every alarm in her mind. "Tommy?" she whispered, her voice barely a shaky breath. "Is that you?" Tommy's voice chimed back from the other room, oblivious to her creeping dread. "No, Mom. That's my friend. He wants you to come outside." Panic twisted in her stomach. "What friend, honey?" She pressed, her knuckles widening as she gripped the edge of the window frame. The one with the secret about Mr. Anderson. The window rattled with urgency as the figure outside lifted a hand, fingers splayed wide like a child beckoning their unwitting playmate. Time dragged, seconds dragging like hours. Julia felt sweat bead at her brow and chill seep into her bones. She couldn't take her eyes off that silhouette, couldn't look away from the lurking shadow that had drawn her into its darkness. "Tommy, stay there," she commanded, locking her eyes onto the kid at the window. "I'm coming to get you." Only Tommy's silhouette sat still, watching, while the figure outside twitched with anticipation. With shaking hands, Julia moved toward the front door, her feet heavy as lead. The old wood of the door creaked ominously as she unlatched it. Outside, the air hung thick with a dense fog, swirling around her ankles like ghostly whispers. Once outside, she felt a rush of adrenaline. Everything looked eerily familiar yet completely alien. Maplewood was a strange sort of quiet, each sound stretching out, amplifying her trepidation. The streetlights flickered, casting ghostly halos that danced over the pavement, making the figures flit in and out of view. "Tommy," she whispered urgently, scanning the darkness, "where are you?" Suddenly, a low chuckle floated from the street corner. It was sharp and malevolent, slicing through the fog like a knife. Julia's heart raced as she willed herself to remember that parental instinct, her duty was to protect her children. But as the laughter echoed, she saw it wasn't just Tommy standing in the corner. Shadows roiled around him, morphing like smoke into shapes that made her stomach twist. "Mom, look!" Tommy pointed, wide-eyed with the innocence of childhood that felt starkly out of place. The figure outside wavered, morphing further into the shape of a child, its features obscured by darkness. "He wants you to come play with us, Julia." At that moment, flashes of all the missing children crossed her mind, faces on milk cartons and dreadful news reports, each one a haunting reminder of Maplewood's hidden horror. Julia took a faltering step backward, feeling around for the door she'd just crossed. "No. You can't," but it was too late. The figure lunged, rushing toward her with impossibly swift movement, eyes glinting like sharpened glass. She turned to run but felt icy hands grasp at her ankles, pulling her down toward the ground. "No! Get away from her!" Tommy screamed, but his voice was drowned out by an overwhelming chorus of sinister whispers that filled the air. Julia struggled against the unseen grip, she could feel the weight of her fears crashing down on her. And just as she began to scream, something shattered in the air, a mass of sound and fury that seemed to pierce through the gloom and confusion. Tommy stood transfixed, his innocent gaze hovering between his mother's plight and the figure so close, waiting. Choking on the panic that gripped her throat, Julia fought against the night, her heart screaming against the oppressive silence. What had she walked into? Just as Julia felt herself slipping away into the dark, she glimpsed something unusual, a glimmer of light cutting through the fog, drifting from Mr. Anderson's direction. "What secret do you hold, Mr. Anderson?" she thought, and the realization clawed at her, demanding answers. What was hidden beneath the surface of this peaceful neighborhood, and would she uncover it before it was too late? A flash of light sliced through the enveloping fog, bright enough to sear Julia's eyes. For one fleeting moment, it illuminated the twisted figure looming near Tommy. The child's dispirited face now wore a grotesque grin, framed by shadow. But Julia's instincts screamed at her to reach Tommy, to wrap him in her arms and shield him from whatever dark horror was unfolding. "Tommy! Come here!" she shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. The boy stared, mesmerized, as if the darkness was weaving its spell around him. The silhouettes began to swirl, with more forms emerging from the dusk, each one beckoning with chilling farewells. Julia lunged toward her son, every muscle rigid with fear and urgency. Then, the ground beneath her seemed to pulse, as though the earth had drawn a breath. The laughter of the figures morphed into a choir, a cacophony of lost and forgotten children resounding through the night. Join us, join us!" Panic eroded her courage. "No, no!" Julia screamed, but it came out as a pitiful whisper. She could almost feel the chill of their icy invitations wrapping around her throat. She dashed forward, breaking through the mist, desperate to make her way to Tommy. "Don't you dare listen to them." But the sounds danced around her, wrapping her in stories of sweetness turned sour, promises of fun twisted into nightmares. Tommy recoiled at Julia's wild eyes, torn between the call of the figures and the warmth of his mother's voice. The pleasure of the sinister attraction was palpable, pulling at him with the weight of dark curiosity. "But Mom, they said they could play with us. They know a secret, Tommy." Julia's voice cracked and shattered the mirage of innocence. The flicker of light from Mr. Anderson's house pulsed like a heartbeat, close enough now to draw her focus but too far yet to grasp. "Come here. Now." Her breath came fast, heavier with every step as she ran. The shadows shifted, and the laughter crescendoed, a dreadful mockery of life. Yet, despite her fear, something primal within her surged. With every ounce of resolve, she bolted toward him, her hand stretching toward the fading grip of Tommy's reality. Just as she grasped his wrist, the figures lunged forward, their sinister forms distorted, faces shifting between lovers and monsters. The ground tremored harder, dislocating Julia's footing. She stumbled, her grip loosening on Tommy, and she watched in horror as shadows began to envelop him. "No!" she cried out, flailing, her heart pounding as she pulled against the invisible chains attempting to drag them both into oblivion. It felt as if time twisted around them, each pulse of fear dragging them farther into desolation. "Tommy!" she sobbed, but he was slipping away like a dream unraveling in the waking light. With one last surge, she yanked him back, and it happened all at once. A storm of chaos erupted in the street. Suddenly, a door burst open from Mr. Anderson's house, illuminating the scene with a blinding light that pushed against the shadows. "Get inside!" a voice bellowed, urgent and commanding. The figure at the doorway was unmistakable Mr. Anderson, his eyes wild and frantic. Julia's heart stalled. What stood behind him? What haunted histories lurked in that doorway? In that moment, a piercing scream echoed from the street corner, a sound of pure, unfiltered horror. Julia's breath hitched. What if they were too late? "Mom, I'm scared." Tommy whimpered, his voice trembling as the shadows writhed closer, ravenous. "Hold on to me." Julia yelled, heart deep in her throat as she sprinted toward the light, Tommy in tow. Even as the shadows unfurled like mist behind them, footsteps echoed in the distance, disembodied laughter mingling with her fast-beating heart. She could feel it all around her, a haunting presence, an unholy legacy that felt older than time. But there was no turning back. Whatever secret Mr. Anderson hid, they were about to find out. What else awaited them in the glow of his threshold that was both salvation and doom? Would they escape the thing that had been waiting for them all along? Julia burst through the doorway, pulling Tommy inside just as the shadows collided against the threshold. A gust of wind rushed in, slamming the door behind them with a bone-rattling thud. The warmth of Mr. Anderson's home seemed surreal against the chill that clung to them, the moment pregnant with a tension that gnawed at her insides. "Are you okay?" Mr. Anderson breathed, his voice edged with both urgency and panic. The way he moved, shifting nervously from foot to foot, reminded Julia of a cornered animal. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting the nightmarish figures to flood in after them, to break through the fragile sanctum of this house. "Tommy! Speak to me!" Julia turned to her son, who stood rooted to the spot, staring wide-eyed at the narrow hallway. Shadows danced in the corners, and she could see how the dread distorted his youthful features into confusion and fear. "Mom, what were those things?" His small voice quavered, echoing her own spiraling thoughts. "I don't know," Julia stammered. "But we can't stay here. We need to find a way out." "Out?" Mr. Anderson's laugh was tight and nervous. "You don't understand, Julia. They have gotten stronger. They won't let you leave this house once they've marked you." A chill snaked down Julia's spine. She had felt their icy touch, the way it clawed at her heart, urging despair. It was not just shadows that had haunted her son, she realized suddenly, dread pooling in her stomach, that whatever followed them had chosen to linger here. The mark Julia couldn't finish the thought. Are we trapped? No. Mr. Anderson snapped, panic flickering in his eyes. There's a way out. We just have to find the others. Unless his voice trailed off, eyes darting toward a wooden door at the end of the hallway, almost hidden in shadow. What others? Julia pressed, panic bubbling up again. What was he hiding? What lay behind that door? Just come with me. He gestured for them to follow, striding toward it as if leading to salvation. The hallway felt alive, breathing down their necks, filled with the whispers of lost souls clawing for release. They moved cautiously, but dread coiled tighter with each step, suffocating in its intensity. As they reached the door, Mr. Anderson paused, placing a trembling hand on the knob. You need to know whatever you see, don't look away. It's the only way to survive. Survive what? Julia demanded, sincerity mingling with the terror she felt. Just trust me. Tommy had begun to shake, eyes darting about as if he felt them, those twisted figures closing in, lurking just outside. Julia squeezed his hand, her own heart racing, and pushed the door open. Inside, the darkness thickened, pressing down on them like a weight. The room was small, a cluttered mess of knickknacks and dusty furniture piled in haphazard piles. In the center stood a circular table, looming like an altar, adorned with tattered photographs of children. They all wore muted smiles, their eyes unnaturally wide, staring into the void. Who are they? Julia whispered, horror creeping into her voice. They were like you, once, Mr. Anderson murmured, his tone somber. They too sought a way out, but the door slammed shut behind them, plunging the room into howling silence. Julia's breath hitched as a chill swept through the air. The photographs seemed to twist, the faces morphing into grotesque mockeries, their smiles fading as the shadows from the corners slithered forward. Hold on to each other. Julia shouted, her voice cracking as the room began to warp around them, darkness whispering promises of despair. Don't look away, Tommy. But as the shadows stretched forth, they found themselves ensnared in a creeping dread that made Julia's heart race. The figures from the street laughed behind the door, their voices spectral, beckoning in the night. All at once, the truth surged forth. The room, the photographs, Mr. Anderson, they were part of it all, inextricably tied to the darkness that sought to consume their souls. And then everything went black. What was happening? Had they been marked? And in the depths of that terrifying void, a single thought emerged: what had they just awakened? Darkness enveloped them, a shroud that tightened around Julia and Tommy, suffocating and cold. Panic surged through Julia as confusion danced along the edges of her consciousness. Tommy, don't let go. She shouted, fighting against the thickening gloom that tried to separate them. It was impossible to tell where they were or if they were even still in the same room. All she could feel was the breath of the void, chilling and relentless, pushing against her as if it were alive. With a sudden jolt, a sliver of light broke through, illuminating the space with a faint, sickly glow. Julia found herself standing back in the hallway, the wooden door where they had entered now just a muted outline against the brightness. Yet, it felt wrong. This wasn't the safety of the home she had once known. Mom? Where are we? Tommy's voice quavered, trembling as he gripped her hand even tighter. She looked down, her heart aching at the fear etched across his face. I don't know, sweetie. But we're together, Julia replied, forcing confidence she didn't feel. They stepped forward cautiously, shapes writhed in the edges of the light, whispers slithering around them like phantom fingers. Julia turned her head, catching fleeting glimpses of faces, some familiar, yet twisted. Primal terror kicked in, that need to flee. Mr. Anderson. She called, but there was no answer. Suddenly, the whispers shifted, forming a cacophony of voices, merging into a dissonant symphony. They echoed her name, distorting her own sense of self. "Julia, Julia, join us, Tommy, we have to." Before she could finish, shadows lunged at them, a throng of long, spindly limbs reaching out from the darkness. The figures were grotesque, eyes shining like black coals, their mouths curling into malevolent grins that revealed rows of jagged teeth. "Run!" she screamed, pulling Tommy close as they sprinted down the hallway. The floor felt sticky beneath their feet, as if the very ground was attempting to bind them in place. Sparks of light flickered, illuminating fragments of the hallway, revealing doorways that beckoned invitingly. Julia could have sworn she saw Mr. Anderson standing by one of them. His eyes glowed unnaturally, the shadows flicking against his frame like eager serpents. "Help me!" he mouthed silently, yet the horror in his eyes told a different story. "Mom, don't!" Tommy shrilled, pulling at her arm. The terror in his voice dragged her back from the brink of her decision. She could feel the weight of the darkness pursuing them, wrapping around their ankles like vines. "No, we can't go that way." Just then, a thunderous roar erupted from behind, reverberating through the hallway, as the shadows surged forward with a palpable hunger. Julia felt the air tremble around them, the walls creaking in protest as if the house itself were shifting to trap them. "Turn around. Follow me," Julia shouted, yanking Tommy toward a narrow staircase that spiraled up into the unknown. They raced upward, each step echoing loud and claustrophobic. The shadows were relentless, a growing mass of despair that clawed at their heels. Julia's breath became shallow, panic suffocating her thoughts. She could feel the tendrils of darkness licking at her skin. At the top of the staircase, they burst through a door that opened into a strange attic filled with more photographs, some flickering with stories, others fading into nothingness. In the corner, a warped mirror reflected blurred images of their faces, merging with the shadows that lingered behind them. "Tommy," she stammered, the cold creeping back into her bones. "What are we supposed to do now?" As they faced the mirror, the darkness pressed against them, hungry and insistent. Fear prickled at Julia's spine. This was no sanctuary, this was an inescapable trap designed to ensnare them. Suddenly, she felt Tommy's grip loosen. "Mom?" he whispered, eyes wide as he pointed to the mirror's surface, which was rippling like water. The reflections twisted and writhed, revealing glimpses of others' lost souls, trapped in an endless cycle of despair. "What have we awakened?" Julia thought, dread seeping in. The walls began to pulse, shadows creeping toward them, merging with the very essence of their fear. "Mom!" Tommy screamed, backing away. And just then, with the force of a crashing wave, the mirror shattered, sending shards of glass flying. "Hold on, Tommy. We can't let go." But as darkness surged forth, something cold and unyielding gripped Julia's arm. "What now?" she thought, heart racing, as the shadows lunged again. This time, she knew, there would be no return. The glass splintered like screams through the attic, the sharp fragments glistening with otherworldly light before disappearing into swirling shadows. Julia's heart raced, each beat like the panic-driven drums of war in her ears. "Tommy, we need to," but before she could finish, a pull from the darkness yanked her from Tommy's grasp. It was as if the shadows were alive, eager tendrils snaking around her wrists, a cold hand gripping tight. The moment she let go, the air thickened, vibrating like a taut string ready to snap. "Mom!" Tommy's voice pierced through the chaotic cacophony of whispers. The boy stood just beyond her reach, eyes wide with terror, his small body trembling as he watched the shadows writhe eager tendrils toward her. "Don't move, Tommy!" Julia screamed, struggling against the icy grip of the darkness. Each second felt like an eternity as she battled the confines of despair closing in on her. Her surroundings blurred as if her mind were losing clarity, the darkness pulsed, drawing her closer into its suffocating embrace. Faint shapes writhed in the corners of her vision, twisted forms that seemed to remember her, whispering her name with muffled laughter. It was an echo from the attic's depths, faces long gone, now worn and hollow, trapped in the glass shards. "Julia, join us," they chanted, their voices dripping with otherworldly seduction. Julia squeezed her eyes tight, fighting the urge to give in to the insidious call. In that moment, she remembered the glimmer of hope. "I will not let you take him." With a newfound determination, she summoned every ounce of strength, yanking her arm free with a force that rattled her bones. She spun around, desperate to reach Tommy. The boy remained frozen, unable to comprehend the chaos swirling before him, yet tears streamed down his face. "Tommy, listen to me. You have to run," she screamed, her voice breaking, raw with despair. But before he could move, a scream reverberated from behind. A figure loomed in the shadows, gaunt and tall, its gaunt features illuminated by the flickering attic light. "Julia." The voice was all too familiar. It was Mr. Anderson, but distorted like a marionette pulled by unseen strings. His mouth opened wide, revealing that same twisted grin Julia had seen before, teeth sharp, as the shadows morphed to surround him. "Help me, Julia. They won't let me go." Panic surged again, strong enough to break through the shadows pressing against her. Julia's instinct screamed to save him, but dread crawled up her spine, warning her that whatever poor soul was before her might already be lost. "Mom, please." Tommy's voice broke through the fog of confusion, shaking her out of the horror. She turned just in time to see the darkness lurch toward Tommy, shadows whipping like a storm around him. "Not him!" she shouted in defiance, lunging forward. The shadows lashed at her, deep and cold, wrapping around her legs as she dove for Tommy. Time slowed as her fingertips brushed his arms. "And no." The guttural sound echoed from behind as Mr. Anderson twisted, his voice a mix of man and beast, desperate and hungry. In that moment, dread flickered with clarity. Julia suddenly understood, we're part of this, the shadows feast on fear. With a final, monstrous roar, the glass shards scattered, and the fractured images began to merge, twisting and turning until they formed a vortex of shadowy horror, pulling not only them but the specters too. Everything seemed to collapse in on itself, threatening to swallow them whole. "Mom! We need to go." Tommy's panic sparked Julia to act, feelings from the deepest corners of her heart exploding into action. Together. Clenching Tommy's hand back in her own, she turned to the swirling mass, facing the horrors and chaos of the abyss. "Together!" she shouted, almost laughing in the face of despair, as they made to leap into the darkness, but then, just as they reached the edge, something held them back, a flicker of hope in the eye of a storm. What lay on the other side was a question she couldn't bear to ask. What if this was only the beginning? A thunderous crack split the air as Julia felt the shadows squeeze tighter. The vortex hissed around them, whispering their fears like a cruel serenade. Hold on," she urged Tommy, even as doubt gnawed at her. The pull intensified, yanking them back as though the darkness sensed their desperate resolve. Their surroundings twisted and churned, the attic now appearing like a fractured reflection in a shattered mirror. The walls appeared to close in, warped by nightmarish shapes that echoed the faces she thought she had left behind. "Mom!" Tommy cried as the grip of cold shadow threatened to consume them both. The boy's small fingers almost slipped from her grasp. Julia's entire body was a mass of tension, muscles straining against that relentless tide. "Don't let go, baby. Trust me," she shouted, panic crackling in her voice. Then, a deafening rumble filled the space as Mr. Anderson lunged forward, trailing dark energy like an aura of despair. "You have to come back, Julia," he wailed, his form shifting grotesquely. "It's beautiful, this freedom." "No!" she screamed, her voice laced with horror. The last thing she wanted was to witness that sickly grin stretched across his face, the hunger in his gaze. Somehow, she knew he was lost, just a puppet now. The shadows coiled tightly around them. Julia felt a chill carve its way into her bones. The walls around her vibrated, pulsating as if alive, and for a moment, she lost her sense of direction. She could hardly tell what was real anymore, all that remained was the haunting call of those trapped within the glass, suffering souls, their eyes pleading for release. Ripping free from the grasp of doubt, she cast her eyes toward the swirling tempest of fear that threatened to tear them apart. "Look at me, Tommy. Focus on me," she commanded, anchoring herself to her resolve. "We're getting out of here." As if on cue, a deafening surge erupted from the shadows, an angry roar threatening to drown her. Then Julia saw it, an opening. A flicker of light through the darkness, shimmering like a distant star. "Run!" she shouted, adrenaline surging through her veins. With renewed purpose, they tore through the darkness. Shadows lashed out at their heels, shrieks clawing at their sanity, but Julia wouldn't allow the horrors to swallow them. They raced forward, hungry whispers brushing past her ear. "Stay, stay, become one of us." That flickering light became larger, blinding, as they barreled toward it. The world twisted, shapes enveloping them, but Julia held on tight to Tommy, digging her feet into the floor as the shadows clawed at their backs. "Keep going." They burst through the light, and suddenly, all was still. And then, everything changed. They found themselves back in the attic, but it was darker, colder, and the glass lay shattered at their feet. Tommy blinked, disoriented. "Mom?" There was something off about the silence. No whispers. No shadows. Just emptiness. "What happened?" Julia gasped, heart racing. But even as she spoke, dread coiled within her. Something wasn't right. The air crackled with tension, a heavy stillness filled the space around them, the walls shifted slightly, alive with a sentient presence. And then, behind Tommy, the glass shards began to tremble. Julia's heart sank. "Tommy, get away from that!" she screamed, adrenaline coursing through her body as she flung herself toward him. Too late. The glass pieces quivered and glowed, whispering vocals returning, now clearer, more insistent. The faces re-emerged, their features twisted in anguish. A cacophony of voices sang out, "You're part of us now." It's begun. As horror dawned on Julia, the shadows began to unravel once more, creeping forward like a wave. "Mom, what is happening?" Tommy whimpered, eyes wide with fear. "Stay close," Julia shouted, panic gripping her once more. She needed to find a way out, but the shadows thickened, contorting around her, taunting. Had they truly escaped, or merely delayed the inevitable? As the darkness closed in, Julia's mind raced, frantically seeking a way to shield her son from the horror that threatened to consume them both. Could they ever truly be free, or was this only the beginning of their nightmare? The ominous pull of the shadows intensified, wrapping tighter, hinting at secrets waiting to unfold. In that moment, one thought lingered: the real nightmare was only beginning. The air throbbed with a low hum, a dreadful resonance that vibrated through Julia's bones. The faces in the glass shards twisted further, eyes that seemed alive with despair. As if sensing her fear, the once quiet attic now pulsated with malicious anticipation. "Mom?" Tommy's voice quaked, a fragile thread in the deafening void. She pulled him close, scanning the shadows that encroached from every direction. "I don't know," she admitted. "But we have to find a way out." The whispers surged, climbing to a fever pitch, a terrifying chant of "Stay, stay, come to us." Julia pressed her hands over her ears, but the words burrowed into her mind, planting seeds of dread. "Tommy, we need to move," Julia shouted, her voice breaking. She surged forward, dragging her son along, desperate to escape the encroaching darkness. They stumbled over glass shards that crunched beneath their feet, lights flickering like dying stars above them. Shadows twisted, bubbling with rage, each undulating mass searching for purchase, seeking to latch onto them. The atmosphere thickened as if the very world was bearing down, encouraging despair. "Where are we?" Tommy cried, but Julia didn't have the luxury of answering. Instead, she tugged him toward the rickety staircase that led down to what she hoped would be sanctuary. As they reached the first step, a voice rang out, clear and chilling. Julia, she froze. The voice was familiar, slithering through her defenses. Mr. Anderson? Come back, we need you, the voice beckoned, now softer, almost soothing. It's wonderful here, no. She shouted, her resolve hardening. You're lost. You have to fight it. But doubt gnawed at her. The shadows danced like a swarm of malevolent insects, teasing the corners of her vision. She felt the presence of the souls trapped in the glass, their anguish palpable, pushing her toward an edge she couldn't allow herself to cross. With a surge of panic, she lunged down the stairs, heart racing. The atmosphere shifted, and a heavy wave of cold enveloped them. Each step resonated with the echoes of those lost, every footfall vibrated with a morbid pulse. Suddenly, the staircase morphed before their eyes. It spiraled into a chasm that seemed to open beneath them, a swirling abyss of shadows hungry for their warmth. Julia clutched Tommy tighter, breath hitching in her throat. Look away. Don't look. She urged, forcing him to turn his gaze. Just as she said it, the shadows flared, blinding her for a fleeting second. When her vision returned, the room had transformed again. They were back on the attic floor, but the surroundings felt even more charged, like static in the air before a storm. They stood surrounded by a circle of glass mirrors, reflecting distorted versions of themselves, their expressions captured in eternal horror. Mom, this isn't real, is it? Tommy's small voice trembled. I wish it weren't, she breathed, panic swelling in her chest. We have to break them. But before she could act, the reflections in the shattered glass began to stir. Each face held a secret, a story frozen in time, and as she locked eyes with them, she gasped. Tommy, they're trying to tell us something. The whispers spiraled around them once more, insistent and hungry. Join us, be part of us. Julia felt the pull intensifying, the allure beckoning with sweet promises. Her heart pounded. Her instincts screamed to flee, yet the shadows reached into her, murmuring illusions of escape. Mom! Tommy cried, yanking her back to reality. Don't listen. But as Julia strained against the tide, fragments of forgotten memories flooded in, faces of loved ones, echoes of laughter, and a comfort she feared losing. The reflections whispered louder now, truths buried under layers of dread. A sudden realization struck her: the deeper the shadows pulled, the stronger the bond they formed. The attic was no mere space, it was alive, feeding off their fear. Fight them! Julia yelled, rallying her last reserves. We can't let them take us. But somewhere in the depths of her mind, a nagging thought lingered: what if they were already too late? As the shadows clawed further, Julia held onto her son, muscles trembling. Would they escape this torment before they became part of the darkness? With every flicker of doubt, the walls whispered ominously, promising everything and nothing at once. Fear coiled tighter than ever. In that moment, she knew one truth: every shadow had a story, and their own was only beginning to unfold. Trust me! Julia shouted, bracing against the overwhelming darkness as it lunged forward, eager for their surrender. But would this be the final stand, or simply a prelude to the unimaginable nightmare awaiting them? The moment Julia's voice echoed through the thick, suffocating air, a chorus of mocking laughter resonated around them. The shadows rippled in response, extending long, claw-like fingers toward them as if to solidify their dark intentions. Julia panicked, instincts urging her to revel in the light of reality instead of surrendering to the gripping shadow. She wrestled with the fear that threatened to consume her. Stay close, she urged Tommy, gripping his tiny hand tighter. Together, they backed away from the encroaching darkness, but each step felt like a battle against a magnetic force pulling them toward the suffocating stillness. Mom, I can hear them. Tommy whimpered. It's like they're whispering my name. Fight it! She roared, trying to drown out the whispers curling around them, wrapping them in chilling serenades, seducing them to join. This is not real. The memories spilled forth like a floodgate opening. Long-forgotten voices of past family gatherings echoed in her mind, wrapping around her heart with nostalgia, threatening to break her resolve. "Tommy, don't listen," she gasped, frantically pulling him along. But the pull of the spectral realm felt tangible, as if it latched onto her very soul. The glass reflections shimmered, twisting into nightmarish distortions of her and Tommy, grotesque smiles stretched over tortured expressions. "Why are they doing this?" Tommy cried, tears streaming down his cheeks, his voice fragile against the cacophony of anguish. "Because they're trapped," Julia shouted, realization crashing down like an avalanche. "They want to take us with them." The whispers escalated, rising into a chaotic symphony of lost souls. "Join us, don't fight." The words slithered around her, seductive yet repulsive, they filled her with ice-cold dread. "Mom!" Tommy yanked his arm but was met with a sudden darkness spinning toward them. An overwhelming shadow contorted into the shape of someone familiar, a twisted parody of Mr. Anderson, the friendly teacher now transformed into an embodiment of despair. "Julia, join us. We are free," the fanged imitation crooned. "No!" she shrieked. "You're not free, you're trapped." But even while she screamed, the underlying truth stabbed deep within her. How many were trapped, beggars on the threshold of salvation? The shadows knew their stories, their pain, and their longings. Each whisper contained a promise that shimmered enticingly. "Mom," Tommy's voice quavered, dragging her back to the moment. He was losing faith, fear was thickening in the air. She had to shield him. They had to fight. "Let us break the glass," Julia shouted, her heart racing, each word igniting a spark of determination. "We're not joining you." She charged toward the nearest shard, a jagged reflection that bore her image. With all her strength, she swung her fist, connecting with a sound that shattered more than just glass. It broke through the barrier of despair encircling them. For a moment, the world went silent. Light poured in, piercing the darkness and washing over her like a warm wave. Something cracked within the shadows that had long since pulsed with malevolence. But before they could breathe a sigh of relief, a chilling roar erupted from the depths. "No! You cannot escape!" The very fabric of the room shook, and a whirlwind of shadows surged, angry and relentless, as the reflections in the shards screamed at a deafening pitch. With adrenaline propelling her forward, Julia yanked Tommy and pushed on, desperate for their escape, yet knowing one truth still lingered heavily: the way out could very well lead them deeper in. "Mom! Is there really a way out?" Tommy asked, fear dancing in his eyes, almost echoing the sorrowful shadows. Julia bit her lip, doubt clawing at her. "I swear we'll find a way. But we can't look back." Each pounding heartbeat echoed within the torrents of darkness spiraling toward them. Just as they reached another murky corner, the attic twisted once more. Would they become the latest tales woven into the whispers, or would they survive to tell their own? Behind them, shadows writhed and reached. Awaiting a moment of hesitation, craving victory before hanging their silent price. The moment Julia's fist connected with the glass, a shiver of hope coursed through her veins. A crack erupted like thunder, splintering the remaining shadows that wrapped around them. Her heart raced as a beam of brilliant light flooded into the attic, illuminating the disordered chaos swirling around them. Pushing against the oppressive darkness, Julia yanked Tommy close, their silhouettes now illuminated like warriors ready for battle. "Tommy, we need to move," she shouted, urgency fueling her resolve. With ghostly fingers still stretching after them, they sprinted toward the bright opening at the end of the hall. "They're angry," Tommy cried, glancing back as more shadows gathered, thrumming with despair and rage. "They want us to stay." "I know," Julia yelled, gripping his hand tighter. "But we won T. Remember what we talked about. We have to keep running." Every heartbeat felt like a countdown as they barreled through the light. The shadows screeched behind them, lamenting their loss, a dark symphony echoing through the hollow space. Julia's breath hitched at the thought of the souls trapped, but she couldn't falter. They wouldn't give in to fear. As they neared the end, they felt the warmth of the light enveloping them. Julia could almost hear the whispered promises of safety, but she pushed the deceit from her mind. Just as they hit the threshold, a final shadow lunged, reaching out and clawing at their backs. The light exploded around them like a star, and without thinking, Julia pulled Tommy through. With a jolt that felt like the end of a dream, they crashed onto soft grass. The air smelled fresh, alive with possibility. They squinted against the sudden brightness, their surroundings transformed. Are we outside?" Tommy gasped, taking in the vibrant colors, the gentle breeze dancing through the trees. The darkness that once felt all-consuming was now fading behind them, retreating in the moments of clarity. "I think so," Julia replied breathlessly, looking around to confirm their striking change of scenery. They had returned to the Maplewood neighborhood, but everything felt lighter, almost surreal. The oppressive fog was gone. "We made it." A flicker of doubt loomed in her chest, a whisper that wanted to link back to the shadows. But what about? In that instance, Mr. Anderson appeared in the distance, his form shadowed but undeniably human. His expression was no longer maniacal, it was soaked with relief. He stumbled forward, struggling against an unseen force. "Julia. Tommy. You're safe," he called. But Julia's heart sank, the memory of their last encounter haunting her. "We can't trust him," she shouted, instinctively pulling Tommy closer. "Wait." Mr. Anderson gasped, desperation in his voice. "I can help you. You need to know this isn't happening." Julia shook her head, each second felt like an eternity. She couldn't let the darkness back in. "We need to leave this place behind." "Julia." Tommy cried out as the shadows began to flicker at the edges of the bright atmosphere, inching toward Mr. Anderson, a curtain of despair unveiling itself once more. "I know, sweetheart. We'll be okay." She turned, pushing her past doubts aside. "We've come too far." As shadows surged forward threatening to engulf her son and the rest of Maplewood, Julia grasped his hand tightly. Tiny wisps of darkness clawed at them, and in that moment, Julia anchored herself in a fierce respect for the power of love they shared. "Tommy, listen closely," she instructed. "No matter what happens, we stay together, and we never look back." The shadows screamed a chorus of lost souls swirling, but they were met with their unyielding resolve. With a deep breath, Julia stepped forward, clutching her son, and the two of them let the light guide them. They sprinted toward liberation, bursting through the remnants of dark memories that seemed eerily familiar but distant now. As they crossed the threshold, the air cracked with energy, shadows dissipating like thin mist. Hope surged through Julia's chest, uncertainty lingering, but she dared to breathe freely again. Together, they ran, far from the darkness, towards the bright horizon that broke beyond Maplewood. Entrapped no longer, they felt laughter rise in the distance, children's voices mingling with spring's laughter, life back in full bloom. As the streets faded behind them, Julia held Tommy tightly, her heart racing with a new promise, one of vigilance and love that would always be her guiding light. They had fought darkness, they had broken through. Safety, acceptance, and even solace awaited them beyond that haunting threshold. "What now, Mom?" Tommy whispered, looking up at her with wide eyes full of wonder. Her breath filled with gratitude. "Now, we start over," she said softly, warmth radiating through her chest. Together. As the sun dipped low, embracing the horizon, Julia looked back one last time. The shadows had lost their grip, the weight of dread eased slowly, until all that remained was a memory, softening like an echo fading into the night, and in that moment, she knew they would never let it pull them in again. Their journey had reshaped them, crafting a bond that would never falter or fade. Now this is it, folks. You've come on this wild, heart-pounding journey with us, and I need you to smash that like button right now to feed the algorithm. Your support is crucial. Don't wait a second longer, subscribe immediately to the channel for more exclusive stories to keep your heart racing. And please, flood the comments with your thoughts about this mind-blowing ending and your theories. Only true fans understand the importance of spreading the word, so instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Let us keep this amazing community growing strong together.